past 4 decades in the United States trust industry has just been remarkable. The amount of change, modern trust law that has proliferated has just changed the context of everything that we understood in the trust world. Really beginning in 1983, of course, with the birth of the dynasty trust, which of course happened when South Dakota, the first state in the country, abolished the rule against perpetuities. And in our view, really cleared the way for what has become an evolution of modern trust law that has changed really all aspects of how we view the trust world. And what I'm talking about is the traditional way of viewing trustee and trust services really came from big banks and the big bank world, where asset management, trust of course services, banking, in some cases insurance sales, all were bundled together into an offering for very large families across the country and also around the world. But these large families became impatient with what was clearly, often, blatant conflicts of interest, high fees, high turnover, and really just a bulky, broken system. And so over the past 40 years, these modern trust laws have changed all of that. And it's been, again, so exciting to watch. It's the genesis of Bridgeford's birth and why we became so passionate about being part of the new story, being part of the new narrative and embracing what has become a new paradigm in the trust services world. So companies like Bridgeford emerged in top-tier trust jurisdictions like South Dakota and Nevada and other jurisdictions, and they were independent trust companies, which of course meant that because of modern trust law, they were able to bifurcate this idea of liability, which essentially meant for the end user large family that they didn't have to adhere to what the big bank told them they needed to do in terms of asset management, or they didn't have to worry about, as I mentioned, this really powerful conflict of interest that really permeated the entire industry. So we were excited about it, and over the last 12 or 15 years at Bridgeford, we've embraced it. As I said, it's a brand new paradigm, something we've written about and talked about and interviewed people on our podcast to talk about, and it just, again, was just such an exciting time. And it really took the industry onto one side of a pendulum. But what we're seeing in the last 2 or 3 years is really an unsettling development in this industry, because this pendulum is starting to swing back into the other direction, back into a bundled approach. And here's what I mean by that. It was no question that this new model, this new paradigm, was a good market solution, which meant what? It meant large families were leaving the big bank model and they were going into the independent, conflict-free model where they maintained and kept direction and control. But of course, large conglomerates, trust companies, banks, financial institutions saw this market opportunity, saw money was to be made, saw that they were losing revenue, and decided to jump into the space. Of course, it's good business, good marketing. The problem is what developed as a solution to what was all wrong with the trust industry is now becoming an issue where large conglomerates are doing two things. One, they're starting their own trust companies in top-tier trust jurisdictions like South Dakota. And that creates problems because that was exactly the problem that the new paradigm solved, which is an independent-based trust company. So in addition to being counterintuitive to the new paradigm, these new trust companies that were being started by international conglomerates are often run by individuals who don't understand U.S. modern trust law or understand, more importantly, how to administer U.S. trusts. So then we have an issue there in terms of, are these trust companies started by international conglomerates operating properly under South Dakota trust law, under U.S. trust law more importantly, or any other trust law in top-tier trust jurisdictions? That's the first problem. The more troubling problem and most recent development that we're seeing across the country, and in particular in South Dakota in the last 6 months, where once very independent trust companies, in some cases some of the first independent trust companies representing the new paradigm I talked about before, have become acquired by an international conglomerate. And so the irony is that these very trust companies that ushered in a brand new way of administering trust and ushered in a world of conflict-free trust administration and powerful asset protection tools and all of the things that we've been so excited about at Bridgeford, all of a sudden are being acquired and become part of the problem that they created themselves to solve 15 or 20 years ago. And so what I talked about earlier, the pendulum is going from one extreme where we have this really exciting and new way of looking at trust law. And then the big banks and the conglomerates and the financial mega institutions are getting back into the world, and they're taking what was once a tremendous solution in the trust industry and creating the problem again. And that's where Bridgeford stands strong. That's where Bridgeford shines and continues to shine. We remain fiercely independent, and that is the goal for many, many years to come. We are excited about the fact that at this point, because of recent changes in the industry, Bridgeford Trust Company is considered to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest, and largest independently, privately owned trust companies in South Dakota. And you may be wondering, well, why does that matter? Because we at Bridgeford are protecting the very essence of what is the new paradigm. No conflict, low fees, tremendous control given back to families and their advisors, bringing asset protection, bringing privacy, bringing the power of modern trust law, again, in a conflict-free manner, again, the new paradigm. And that's what we honor, and that's what we're going to protect. And these recent changes in the industry, as I mentioned earlier, are extraordinarily disturbing to those of us who are passionate about modern trust law, but also very focused on the reason why we started Bridgeford in the first place, was to be the solution and not to become the problem. And we're determined to continue to be the solution and not become the problem, remain wildly and fiercely independent, and continue to serve our families in a conflict-free way across the country and around the world.